There are a lot of rules when it comes to working with exponents in an expression. So they're not hard to remember if you're only working with one at a time. So the difficulty will be when you guys have to remember multiple rules within the same problem. You might have one thing multiplying on the numerator of a fraction, and then it's also being multiplied by an entire another fraction. So there's a lot going on in one problem, but you still have to remember your original rules for each operation. So if we look at number 1, it says product of powers. So product just means multiplication. So when you have two expressions with the same base, so x and x to the 4th times x squared, you add the exponents, and this becomes x to the 6th. So number 2 says, okay, what about power of a power? So that means you have this x to the power of 2, and then you're raising it again on the outside to another power. So when that's the case, you just distribute the outside value into the inside value. When you distribute, you guys are really multiplying, right? So this becomes also, coincidentally, x to the 6th. So number 3 says, okay, what about power of a product? Same idea. That power on the outside goes to the powers on the inside. It's just that you have more than one thing inside. This is really, remember, if you don't see a value, x to the 1st and y to the 1st. So 1 times 5 and 1 times 5 gives you x to the 5th and y to the 5th. You just multiplied the power on the outside to the power on the inside. So what if you have negative exponents? Well, literally all you guys have to do is move the expression with the negative exponent. So if your variable with the negative exponent is in the numerator or the top of your fraction, you move it to the bottom. If your variable with the negative exponent happens to be in the denominator of the fraction, you would move it to the top to make it positive. You literally just move it from wherever it is. So if it's not in a fraction, so our example is x to the negative 6th, this is really over 1. So we need to move that x to the negative 6 to the bottom of a fraction so that it becomes positive. And it still has to be a fraction, so we're just going to put 1 over that. So if it's negative, you just simply move it, and that makes it positive. It's really the inverse. So number 5, it says, what about zero exponents? Anytime you guys have a power of 0, it's sort of just the rule of exponents that it's going to be equal to 1. So anytime you have something to the 0 power, it always equals 1. What about quotient of powers? Okay, so when we multiplied, or we had a product of powers, we added those. Well, when you have a quotient or you're dividing, you want to subtract. You do the numerator value minus the denominator, so the top minus the bottom. So you would do x to the 5th divided by x squared, and do 5 minus 2, and get x cubed, because that's really 5 x's over 2 x's. So what happens is those cancel out, and you're left with 3x times x is x cubed. And number 7, power of a quotient. Same thing, if you have that power on the outside of your parentheses, I always just like to distribute it in first. Now in this case, that's the only step to do. But That's what you will always do with that power on the outside. So this is really x to the first and y to the first. So the 3 goes to both of them. So this becomes x cubed over y cubed. And that's it. So they're not bad when they're by themselves. It's when you start to mix and match them that we'll have to sort of do it step by step, one at a time.